Hi, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joybaking.com. Today we're going to make a blueberry cake, also known as a blueberry buckle. This dessert is just a great way to use fresh blueberries. It's a 3-layer dessert. The bottom layer is a white cake, then the next layer is fresh blueberries, and then that's topped with a cinnamon flavor streusel. So to start, preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 180 degrees Celsius, and you will need an 8-inch square, that's 20 centimeter, baking pan, and then just either butter it or spray it with one of those nonstick sprays. So we're going to start this by making the streusel. In a bowl, put 1/3 cup, that's 45 grams of all-purpose flour, you may know that as plain flour, and to that add 1/3 cup, 65 grams of granulated white sugar, and 1/2 teaspoon of ground cinnamon, and then just whisk those together. Do it with your hands, or I like to use one of these wire whisks. And then to that, I'm going to add 1/4 cup, that's 57 grams of cold butter. You can use salted or unsalted, either one. And I like to cut it into little small dice cubes like this, because what we're going to do is cut the butter into the flour mixture. So if it's in smaller pieces, it's a lot faster and easier to do. So I'm going to use one of these pastry blenders. You could use 2 knives and just kind of cut, or you could even just use your fingertips. What we're looking for is a mixture to be like coarse crumbs. Okay, so there we go. So this is what you're looking for, just kind of coarse crumbs. Don't worry if there's a few big lumps of butter, that's fine. So I'm just going to put this aside, and then we'll start the cake batter. So now for our cake batter. If you're using an electric stand mixer like I am, use the paddle attachment, or you could just use a hand mixer. So the first thing we need is 1/4 cup, 57 grams of butter. Have that at room temperature, and you can use either salted or unsalted. And I'm just going to beat that just until it's nice and smooth. Okay. Next, I'm going to add 1/2 cup, that's 100 grams of granulated white sugar. And I'm just going to beat this, a couple minutes till it's nice and light and fluffy. And if you need to, just scrape down the sides and the bottom of your bowl as you need to. Okay. So this is what we're looking for. We're just trying to get some air in the butter and sugar mixture. So just scrape down the sides and the bottom. And next what we're going to add is 1 large egg, and have that at room temperature, along with 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla extract. And try to use the pure. It has better flavor than the artificial ones. So I'm just going to beat this in. Okay, I'll just give that a quick scrape. Okay, so now you will need 1/3 cup, that's 80 milliliters of milk. You can use whole milk, or you could use like a reduced fat. I'm using a 2%. And then in a separate bowl, I have 1 cup, that's 130 grams of all-purpose flour. You may know that as plain flour. And to that, I'm adding a teaspoon of baking powder and 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Now, if you use salted butter, I probably would leave out the salt here. And then just whisk that together, because you want to make sure that that baking powder is really mixed in to the flour. I'm just using, you could sift it, or I'm just using a wire whisk. So now I'm going to add the flour in 3 additions to our mixture, and alternate that with the milk, and I'm going to do that in 2 additions. So I'm just going to add about 1/3 of the flour, and start on slow speed because you don't want that flour coming up in your face, and then just till it's mixed in. Then add half of your milk. Okay, let's scrape it. Make sure it's all mixed together. And then a little more flour. The rest of our milk. And then the rest of our flour. I think I'm just going to give it a quick stir here. Okay. Okay, it looks good. So there is a little flour on the sides, as you can see, so I'm just going to use my rubber spatula to stir that in. Okay, so now, first, what we're going to do is put the cake batter. Now, as you can see, this is not a lot of cake batter. So we're not going to have a really thick cake. It's kind of equal proportions to cake to blueberries. It's almost more like a square, kind of a square cake. I'm not sure what it is. So you can use an offset spatula or just the back of a spoon and just spread it evenly. Make sure you get that in the corners. And then we will need 2 cups, that's 480 milliliters of blueberries, fresh blueberries. Either these are as you can see, these are really large ones. They're the cultivated ones. If you're lucky enough to live somewhere where you can go out and pick them, the wild ones, you could use those as well. So just spread nice even layer. Make sure you wash your berries and pick through them and get rid of any, soft, mushy ones. You could use frozen blueberries. Of course, if you're using the frozen, it will take longer to bake. Just keep that in mind. Or, you can use this recipe with other fruits. You could use raspberries, blackberries. You could even use slices of apple. I mean, this is a really versatile recipe. But I must admit, I'm kind of partial to the blueberries. Okay, nice even layer there. Okay, so now the last thing is our streusel mixture. Just sprinkle that evenly on the top. Okay, looks good. So now, into the oven, somewhere between 40-50 minutes, until a toothpick inserted into the center comes out clean. Okay, our blueberry cake is now done. As you can see, streusel's nice and golden brown, and a toothpick inserted in the center will come out clean. And another way to know that your cake is done is it starts to pull away, just starts to pull away from the sides of the pan. Now, we're just going to let this cool, and then we'll cut it into slices. So now we'll cut our blueberry cake. You can serve this warm, or at room temperature, or even cold. So the first thing is I just take my knife and go along the sides just to make sure the cake is not stuck to the pan. And then it's got a nice big slice here. And then, as you know, the first piece is always the hardest to get out. If you didn't want to do it this way, you could just scoop it out like you would, say, an apple crisp or something, and just put it in a bowl. But there we go. Beautiful. So as you can see, it's got the white cake on the bottom and then a nice layer of blueberries and then the streusel on top. You could serve it just like this, or it's very nice with the scoop of vanilla ice cream. You can cover and store leftovers either at room temperature, or if you want the streusel to get really cold and kind of crisp, you can store it in the refrigerator for a few days. So until next time, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joybaking.com.